author, columnist, editor-in-chief of LibertyNation.com, talk show host, and conservative policy advocate.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. Today we are talking 1 year of Donald Trump in his second term. It's going to be quite the show. We're covering all the aspects and digging deep on the facts. Please remember, Liberty Nation Radio is sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. And you're here on Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides, as always, and we're joined by longtime host of this here radio show and Liberty Nation senior political analyst, Mr. Tim Donnan. Thanks for being here, Tim.
Good morning, Mark. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year again. It is a new year in many ways, there isn't it, of course, which I guess is your point there, that this is a new year of Donald Trump presidency. So we have just entered the second year of Donald Trump's presidencies, and we've just closed out a year, and so it's been quite an eventful year, I would say, Tim. I think as far as the record books go, this has been one of the busiest in terms of presidential actions and excitements. Now let's talk about how you think that's been politically, how you think it's been constitutionally. We might delve into the melting heads of the media who have spent the last year looking like the bad guys in Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is always a fun image for everybody who hasn't seen it. Tim, how do you think the second first year of Donald Trump's presidency has gone? As 47.
Well, I've been thinking really about the best way to put in perspective the first Trump year, because he's done so much. It's been a presidency of shock and awe. I hate to use that term, but that is really exactly what the first year has been. But there's another way to look at it, which is that the entire first year of Donald Trump's presidency is all about removing any remnants of the Joe Biden administration. It's been about erasing the Biden presidency. This is a piece that Axios wrote, and it was a hard left piece that's highly, it uses loaded language that's supposedly objective, but it really isn't. But they are right in the sense with their headline, how Trump's ruthless first year erased the Biden presidency. And what that means is, every president comes in and signs executive orders, and the last several presidents have signed executive orders overturning the orders of a previous president. But Trump has gone so much further. He has removed climate change as a thing. Nobody's talking about it anymore. He has increased energy production and made us energy independent, probably on the way to becoming energy dominant. He has canceled a lot of the so-called experts that have been telling us how the government should be run and how we should run our lives. He's gotten rid of programs at places like USAID, where one boondoggle after another was uncovered, and that was early in his administration. And he has certainly taken hold of the U.S. role in the world. I think that's probably the most surprising thing, is that he has been as vigilant about the Western Hemisphere and about the influence of Iran and China and Russia. And I think in the long run, Mark, that will be the legacy of his first year, is the way that he took down Maduro. He destroyed Iran's nuclear capabilities. He intervened in several other conflicts and brought peace, or at least ceasefires.
No, talking about Israel and Gaza anymore. I mean, they're not. Yeah, done deal.
No, they're not. And the entire Middle East has been remade, as evidenced by the peace deal that was made following the destruction of Iran's nuclear facilities and the end of that 12-day war between Gaza, between Hamas or Iran, really, and Israel. I mean, Iran has been decapitated. My understanding is that the Ayatollah Khamenei has now been moved to a bunker, which is, of course, famously the last step before Adolf Hitler went down in flames at his own hand. So I think once you're in a bunker and you've got thousands of people in the streets demonstrating and people being killed simply for demonstrating, and the numbers are up in the thousands, Donald Trump has remade the world in his first year. And now I think the second year is going to be all about trying to remake the U.S. in the image that Trump wants it to be in, which is lower taxes, more freedom, hopefully lower healthcare costs, more affordability. Economic growth would be the driver of that. But I think the first year is largely about not only erasing the Biden presidency, but forging, an administration that Trump wished he could have had the first time around, but he couldn't for political reasons. The fact he was a novice, he was so easily flummoxed and was forced to rely on people he didn't know. This time around is a whole different story. And I think the first year is basically laying the groundwork for a second year, because if you look at the big, beautiful bill, I mean, the tenets of that are kicking in now in January of 2026. And that's going to be the key to whether the Republicans can break with history and retain their majorities in Congress come the midterm elections.
Yeah, I want to pull back to a couple of points you made about how presidents tend to use the first segment of their new administrations to undo, or that it's almost like a tennis match, especially in recent years. Somebody comes in, they undo all the executive orders of the last president, and then when that president goes, another one comes in, undoes those orders. Because you remember, we've traveled from, we went 44, 45, 46, 47 in a very short term, right? Shorter than usual, because a lot of presidents serve 2 terms. But I think as well as undoing the executive orders, which is, it's the, what would you say it is? It's the double-edged sword of ruling by executive order, is that, if you can do it with a pen and a phone, somebody else can undo it. But I think what Donald Trump really focused on, as you say, was getting rid of the Biden legacy, but also the ramifications of what Joe Biden did in office. Because, I mean, we saw it over the 4 years that we saw inflation, cumulative inflation reached 22%. And yes, that was coming down before Donald Trump came into office. Although I suspect that's because a lot of price factors started going haywire towards the election. And the massive amount of illegal aliens that crossed the border during the Biden presidency. And what we've seen since Donald Trump came in a year ago is he's been moving to deport or get to self-deport as many people as humanly possible. So it's not just the actions that he seems to be trying to undo, but the fallout of those actions being a mass of drugs entering the country, a mass of illegal immigrants entering the country, inflation driven largely by energy costs, I guess, because, if you're not producing your own energy, you're on the hook for somebody else's. And while there's a war going on in Russia and Ukraine, that's an unstable situation. So yeah, it's been very much, as you finalized with there, it's been a do-over for him for his first year. This was the kind of first year he wished he had back in 2016. Now, we're going to discuss precisely what Donald Trump achieved in his own right. This is the year just gone. After this short break, don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And we're back on Liberty Nation Radio, continuing our conversation with longtime host of this here show, Tim Donner, and I, of course, remain Mark Angelides. So, Tim, we were talking just a little while ago about the removal of Joe Biden's legacy that played such a prominent part of Donald Trump's first year back in office that's now complete. But let's discuss let's call them the high points and the low points of what Donald Trump achieved. And I'll kick this off. I think one of the high points is that he's managed to control inflation, and it's shocking to me that his approval rating on this particular topic is actually 26 points underwater, Tim, which is crazy. So you had 4 years of Joe Biden where cumulative inflation was 22%. And then for pretty much all of the Trump presidency, it's been below 3%, around 2.7. And so what that means is that, I mean, inflation is a tax that just keeps on taking, right? You're getting poorer every year because of inflation. And the idea of controlling inflation is to keep that as minimal as possible while still having the growth that comes with the economy within, and keeping it under around 2.7 for a year, and that's not bad considering the 4 years that went previous. So for me, that's one of the big things, and yet Trump's still 26 points underwater on. Now, bear in mind when inflation was at over 9% under Joe Biden, Joe Biden's approval on this topic, he was 29 points underwater. So there's a difference of 3 points for a 300% increase in what it is. It's madness as far as I'm concerned. So keeping inflation under control, I'd say that's one of the big ones for me for this last year. What about you?
Well, the average person, and that extends to people like you and me who spend all our time analyzing the political sector.
Tim Donner just called me average. That is a step up on what is.
I did not. I said it extends to you and them. But they don't understand, and it's hard for us to understand exactly what causes inflation and the difference between inflation and prices, because it's not always the same. Inflation, yes, if inflation is up, of course, prices are going to go up. But at the same time, there's so many factors that go to an inflationary economy that it takes time to turn around the ship. It's like a large cruise boat. You can't just flip it in a moment. You have to take a big, long turn to reverse things. So I think people, basically, they see their prices haven't gone down that much, so they still think that Trump may be responsible for inflation, or at least can be blamed for it. But in my view, the most important thing he did in the first year was to close the southern border.
Yes.
And to stop the bleeding. The problem, of course, as he tries to, sort of the theme of what we were talking about earlier, trying to erase the Biden presidency, is that you cannot erase the millions of people who were allowed into the country without any vetting. And while the gotaways and the border arrests are down to zero, it's been entirely predictable that once Trump made every effort and continues to clean up Biden's mess when it comes to illegal immigrants and criminal aliens, as much as he's made that progress at the border, he has to deal with the fallout from the Biden years. And I think we're seeing just how substantial that really is, how devastating Joe Biden's open border policy is, because if there was a man of action in the White House, it's Donald Trump. And yet you can see how much trouble he's having trying to get his ICE patrols to arrest the worst of the worst, because the same resistance, the 20% of the American people that oppose anything that Trump does, as we've said before, Trump could walk on water and the left would say, hey, he can't swim. But that's the thing he hasn't been able to clean up. But by reversing the border policy, he has stopped the bleeding. And I don't think anybody thought he could do it quite that fast. The other thing is, once again, the economists were dead wrong about the effect of tariffs. They were panicking. They were saying this was Smoot-Hawley all over again. It would isolate the U.S. and drive up consumer prices. And at least almost a year after Liberation Day tariffs, that has not happened. So, as we've often said, with apologies to our own economic guru, Andrew Moran, economists are almost always wrong, but we still keep listening to them anyway.
We did well. It's all about how they hedge the premonitions, right? So there's data to show that X, Y, and Z will happen, and when it doesn't happen, said, well, there was data to show that doesn't mean it was going to happen. There was data to show it was going to rain, but
we had reason to believe it would happen.
Yeah. Let's get on that because no one else.
I think the reason for that, Mark, is that the tariffs, in Trump's case, are not being used to protect a dying American industry, which is a bad use of tariffs. That's what happened with Smoot-Hawley, and it was a disaster. Trump's just using it as a trade tactic. He's using it to get what he wants out of our trade partners. He raises the tariff in order to get the trade deal he wants, and then he reduces it back down to a lower level. He's used it masterfully. And I think, the traditional political thinkers didn't realize that he's using tariffs for an entirely different reason than they perceived at the time. And so that's been the biggest surprise, is that none of this revolutionary tariff regime has really caused anywhere near the kind of problems that most people expected.
Yeah, actually, I without blowing one's own trumpet, I was actually in the minority. I thought they probably would work quite well, if for no other reason than they would encourage investment on American shores, and that would be good for the economy. And I thought that would kind of offset any damage that.
And that's another thing we won't see the impact of that until this year and beyond.
Yeah,
because it's a long-term game, and of course, Trump has everybody in whiplash by announcing tariffs, then changing them and changing them again. And it just goes to what I think is the principal position of Donald Trump when it comes to the presidency. And I think it was in business for him too. Always keep people off balance.
Yeah.
Never let them know what you're planning to do next. And it keeps them at attention, doesn't it?
It really does. It really does. So we're going to finish up this section with just a quick fire. I want your scores on ABC plus minuses. I'll say a word, you say a score. Immigration.
A.
Tariffs.
B plus.
International affairs.
A plus.
Hiring.
If there is such a thing.
Hiring of the team or the personnel.
I give him a B plus, maybe an A minus. He's of course gone completely out of the playbook to appoint his cabinet, and that was his plan to begin with.
Okay, as parents want to do, I think that gives an average of a B plus from Tim Donner. We'll be back with Tim after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're back on Liberty Nation Radio. Remain Mark Angelides. We're continuing our conversation with Liberty Nation senior political analyst and longtime host of this here show, Mr. Tim Donner. Thanks for sticking around, Tim. Now, we've discussed, I guess we call them the high points of Trump's first year. We've talked about his dismantling of Joe Biden's entire presidential legacy, really. So let's talk the work that he's engaged in now as he's at the 1 year point of his presidency. And I think to do that, maybe the best angle is to look at what's happening legislatively. So we've had, obviously during the first year, we had the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that was almost an all-encompassing roller coaster ride of legislation that Well, actually, let's two questions here. One is, do you think that the effects of the OBBA will are going to come to fruition before the all important midterms, and therefore provide a boost for the Republicans during that period? And secondly, if you don't mind, we'll move on to does Donald Trump have a legislative agenda that involves Congress for 2026?
I've got to think that given all the provisions of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act going into effect this year, that he's done all he can do on the sort of tax and spend side of the equation. But one thing I think he has to attack, because if he doesn't, the Republicans are going to get blamed, even though Obamacare was not their idea and was not a bill that a single Republican voted on back in 2010, 2009, 2010, during the Obama administration. But nevertheless, with the failure so far to re-up on the special Obamacare subsidies that were passed during the pandemic, people's health care costs are rising. And that's for the about 27 million people who have Obamacare. People with just private insurance plans are not affected by this. But you've got to think a second reconciliation bill. First of all, it's going to happen. I mean, the Congress is already working on a second reconciliation bill on top of the first one, which was the One Big Beautiful Bill, which was a reconciliation bill because, of course, there's no way you would get 60 votes in the Senate where the Republicans only had 53 senators. I think the second reconciliation bill will focus largely on health care, because this is the point of crisis, and this is also the point where the Republicans, led by Trump, have the ability, the capacity, the opportunity to change the healthcare landscape. The initial idea was to take the subsidies and that have expired, and instead of simply re-upping on them, to send money directly to Obamacare policyholders so that they could spend the $5,000, which is what Trump proposed, on health care in whatever way they choose. This is on the way to health care freedom. And anything that can get us closer to Americans making more decisions and insurance companies making less about their health care is going to be popular. So I predicted legislatively the big push is going to be on health care and how they can pass a bill that would qualify as a reconciliation bill. Sure. In other words, something that deals only with budget matters, because you cannot have other legislative priorities, non-financial, non-economic issues included.
You know, there are 435 people in Washington, D.C. right now saying, I can slip a little bit of pork into that bill. You know, there's 435 people thinking that.
Of course.
Well, maybe 535, of course, when it hits Senate.
Well, of course, for congressmen, the pork that they want is not pork. It's necessary spending.
Of course, yes.
But the extra spending that others want is pork.
It's one of those It's one of those irregular verbs so made famous by yes Prime Minister. You do he does pork. You do irregular spending. I do necessary spending, and it's all. So let's delve a little bit deeper, if we can, into not the idea behind why what Donald Trump will be doing or what the Republicans will be doing, because we don't know until we see the text of a bill. If we're allowed to see a bill before you get to vote on it, thank you for that one. But it's got to be galling for so many people to be in a situation where you can't seem to get healthcare fixed. There's you've got some people who think the only way forward is like an NHS model, National Health Service model, socialized medicine, like they have in the UK and I guess in most parts for Canada. And I'm here to tell you, it's not ideal. It's not an ideal way to do things. It's not a utopian healthcare system by any means. But I think the idea of Obamacare has been shown to be expensive, costly. It puts a lot of power into the hands of the insurance companies, who, I mean, they're making a lot of money out of it, which, enterprise is great, but it's at the expense of people who are in a locked system. Whereas giving people their, I don't know what they're calling the Trump RX accounts or something, if they've got the choice of where to put the money for their health insurance, that's got to create market competition, right? And market competition, it does drive down prices because it's no longer an Obamacare monopoly. Or have I got this wrong?
No, I think the biggest problem that the Republicans writ large have had for the last 15 years is an utter inability to come up with an alternative to the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, that they could agree on. They've had 15 ideas, but they've had no single idea that they could rally around, support, and advance. And I think what I'm saying is that now is the perfect opportunity for them to do that if they're serious. But I think there's just too many Republicans who are too queasy about changing the healthcare system in the year of a midterm election. I'm sure that many of them would say, well, that's a good idea, but let's do it right after the midterms. But I think Trump doesn't want to wait, and he shouldn't.
Yeah, he shouldn't wait, right? It's his presidency, right? And
but it's historic, every crisis is an opportunity. And the opportunity here is to rejigger healthcare for Americans. As much as people complain, when Obamacare was passed, over 80% of the American people said they were satisfied with their health care. Over 80%. People complain, but they don't want to change what they have. Well, eventually that became Obamacare that everybody had, and a program that was extremely unpopular when it passed is now popular because it is the status quo.
Sure.
And, rhino Republicans and people only concerned about reelection may have trouble really changing up the entire healthcare system. But I think this is the big challenge ahead of Republicans and Trump. And I know for sure that they are working on Obamacare alternatives and that they intend to put that in a second reconciliation bill along with some other economic initiatives.
Here's the thing. I wonder if what they come up with is a good enough system that it is better for the individuals, not beholden to the insurance companies directly, like they are through Obamacare. If what they come up with is solid enough that it could get bipartisan support by breaking down the numbers, I wonder if Democrats still wouldn't vote for it because they don't want to get rid of Obamacare because it's Barack Obama's crowning achievement and he was their party leader and in many ways is still the moral compass of the Democratic Party. But if they could come up with something that actually worked, it is the ideal campaign issue ahead of the midterms. It's like if I were they, we have this for you. This is going to be the best thing. It's going to be better than Obamacare. Here's why. Our only problem is we're not going to be able to vote on it until after the election. So we need you to send us back to Washington, D.C. with enough of a majority to get this passed for you. So if it were a really good idea, wouldn't they be more confident in campaigning on it?
Well, I think one of the things we're discounting is the insurance companies because they absolutely struck gold with Obamacare. I mean, if you run a business and you're told by the government that you're required to provide coverage for every American, I mean, that is a boon for the insurance companies. So I would expect them to be heavily invested in trying to keep Obamacare the way it is now. Nobody trusts insurance companies. They don't like them. They'd rather be done with them. But it is the way things are now. I think the best strategy for the Republicans is to come up with the best possible plan to replace Obamacare or supplement it, at least for starters, and then force the Democrats to vote against it. Because you want to get the Democrats on record about health care so that can be used as a campaign issue, not just for Democrats, but Republicans, because right now Democrats, feel like health care is one of those few issues that they can actually run on beyond their hatred of Donald Trump, because that's all they have right now.
Yes, but it is, as far as single issue parties go, it's quite a good one. It's great optics, language. It's like, people are going to die because of the healthcare. It's great for sound bites.
Yes.
We're going to be back with Tim Donner after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And we're back for our final segment on Liberty Nation Radio. I remain Mark Angelides, and we're continuing our conversation with Tim Donner. Thanks for sticking around to the end, Tim.
My pleasure, Mark.
We can't let you escape without getting your thoughts on Donald Trump's year of foreign diplomacy, because considering it's America First doctrine, I do understand that doesn't mean things begin and end at the county line. But Donald Trump's had quite a remarkable foreign policy year.
That would be the understatement of 2025 and 2026. I mean, he has stepped into the middle of no less than 8 conflicts and tamped down the temperature, tamped down the revolution. He has destroyed Iran's capacity to create nuclear weapons. He has ended the war between Iran and Israel. He has brought Iran to heel. And you can see how Iran has been weakened. Economic sanctions have gone into place. Hyperinflation has overtaken Iran. And he has, I really think that the bombing of Iran's nuclear facilities was a real game changer in the Middle East. It changes the balance of power. It isolates Iran. And it led to a peace deal between Israel and several of its Arab and Muslim neighbors. There's no overstating the importance of this in the most volatile region of the world. And then you get to South America and what's happened in Venezuela, and we don't know whether the vice president of Venezuela will continue to remain in power, probably will temporarily. But things are already changing dramatically in terms of Chinese influence in the Western Hemisphere. Trump has made it of utmost importance to reduce Chinese influence. Now, some people say it's America first, so what are you doing all these things overseas? But really, if you wanted to add one more word to America first, it would be American interests first. And that includes the drug runners from South America. That includes the sword of Damocles being the Iran nuclear threat. That includes a destabilization of the Middle East. So all of these things. And then there are some that, Trump just feels that he can broker peace. In the case of Ukraine and Russia, that was a war. And I think he's absolutely correct. If he had won in 2020, that war would not have broken out. But Russia just exploited the palpable weakness of Joe Biden to start that war of aggression unprovoked. And now Trump doesn't have any direct interest in that war. It's really Europe's problem more than America's. But you can see where he is envisioning his legacy as being the president of peace. And that is a title that he wants to run with.
But I wonder if the one that will elude him, the white whale, will be Russia-Ukraine. And yeah, as you rightly point out, that's a European affair. But American interests first. There are American interests involved here.
Well, it's not like he doesn't care if Russia wins this war. But you can only invest so much political capital before you move on to something else. So I would say that Trump's going to give it another maybe 3 to 6 months.
Right.
And if at that point Vladimir Putin continues to be intransigent, intractable, unwilling to move, or just playing games with threats and stuff like that, I think Trump's going to move on because he's got too many other worlds to conquer, so to speak. And, you know, he's admitted to being incredibly frustrated because the one conflict he said he could end on day one is the one conflict he's not been able to end. You know, I think, but if you think about it, it's very possible that by the time Trump leaves the White House, Venezuela will have fallen, Cuba will have fallen, Iran will have fallen without a single American death.
Well, you made
that's very possible.
I got to interrupt. You did a fantastic article on a rethink of the domino theory on the pages of libertynation.com, and I do recommend everybody goes and checks that out. We'll put a link up here somewhere. And follow the finger edit, guys. And so, yeah, about how the domino theory has kind of gone global rather than by adjacent neighbors. It's something else. And if you could just give us a brief rundown of that, I guess, new initializing theory.
Well, the domino theory was first used during the Vietnam War as a justification for involvement in that war, with the idea that with North Korea communists, China communists, North Vietnam communists, that the Americans had to draw a line in the sand and say, we won't let you go any further. And of course, it was a disaster. But in fact, the domino theory turned out to be true because all of Southeast Asia went communist. Now you have the reverse after the fall of the Berlin Wall, where instead of embracing communism, Eastern Europe started discarding it. And you had Poland, they went first, then you had Czechoslovakia, Romania, Hungary. By the time 1990 was over, every communist government in Eastern Europe had been toppled. And these are regional things, but I would argue that the ideology of the times is what is at play here with Venezuela and Iran. Those protesters in Iran know perfectly well what Donald Trump did with Nicolas Maduro. They were emboldened by it. They were encouraged by it. So this prevailing belief and ideology about liberating people from tyrannical governments has a global reach. Cuba likely will fall because they're on their last legs. They have no economic capacity. And so I think the domino effect is in play here between Venezuela and Iran. And who knows, before this is over, it could spread even further. So I think the domino theory is relevant here, even though it's not specific to a particular region, because Venezuela and Iran are thousands of miles apart. But the impact, the psychological, emotional, spiritual impact of what happened in Venezuela clearly has animated the protesters in Iran.
Possibly the only useful thing globalism has given the world. Tim Donner, thanks ever so much for being with us.
Always a pleasure, Mark.
And that's all we have time for on this special edition of Liberty Nation Radio. Thank you for being here, and thanks to our special guest today, Tim Donner. You are appreciated. Please remember, Liberty Nation does not endorse campaigns, candidates, or legislation. This presentation is no endorsement.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.